The world of essential oils is an ancient and ancestral one. From the Mesopotamian valley, where the Sumerians, Akkadians, and ancient Hebrew tribes were distilling, trading, and using oils, to the apothecaries and the wisdom of the ancient Chinese. From the dusty tombs of Egyptian pharaohs like Tutankhamun to the Silk Road and spice merchants guiding camels burdened with precious ointments, oils, resins, and salves. The ancients knew and prized essential oils for their benefits, and we can enjoy the same benefits today. Maybe not procured from a trader riding into town on a camel, but beneficial just the same. Using oils in the kitchen is a remarkably easy and delicious way to use them, and one that our ancestors, who used oils for religious rituals, cleansing, medical care, and inhalation, in addition to Epicurean delights of the wealthy tables, would have approved of. In this episode, we will discuss what essential oils are, a brief history of their use throughout the world, and some of my favorite ways to use them in the kitchen. We have included a booklet of recipes for all listeners, which can be downloaded at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/downloads.
Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast with Allison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Allison. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well. The sun's been shining today, so I've been enjoying that very much. And
Yes.
you?
Little winter sun. I am also well. It's pitch black outside. Sun won't be
Oh.
up for a while, but when it gets up, that'll be nice.
And have you had some breakfast or have you not eaten yet today?
Yes, I did. I was so hungry this morning. I had poached eggs and toast and butter and
Mm.
a giant cup of water. Kind of boring sounding, but it's what I wanted.
Yeah, sometimes you just want that, don't you? I understand that.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just
yeah.
want water.
How about you?
Exactly.
Lunch? Yeah.
Yeah. We had lunch. Sourdough spelt bread,
Mm.
which I'm now grinding the spelt in the mock mill, which is I'm just slowly adjusting to how much hydration I need because it's different to the
Okay.
pre-ground flour I was working with. So it was quite a sloppy loaf, but it tastes really fabulous.
Mm.
With lard on and a bit of a treat for me, smoked salmon.
Ooh,
I
whoa,
I
yum.
very, very rarely buy smoked salmon
Hmm.
because I don't like buying any salmon that's been farmed. And really, most of the stuff you
Yeah.
see is farmed.
Yep.
The wild stuff, when I do see it, is really expensive.
Yep. Yep.
So I don't get it very much, but I really, really fancied it because it's all in the sort of places where you notice it because it's getting
Hmm.
near Christmas. It's after
Hmm.
Christmas when this is out, but it's just before Christmas when we're recording.
Mm.
So I had that with lemon juice and black pepper. I have to have lemon juice and black pepper on smoked salmon, with
So good.
some carrot salad on the side, which is the carrot salad from Katie Deering's book that Ray Peat talks about, and some sauerkraut, and I think that was it. Yeah, it was very,
Wow.
very
Yum.
nice. Thoroughly
That
enjoyed
sounds
it.
good.
Yeah.
Usually
So,
I
hmm
usually do a scoop of sauerkraut if I'm doing poached eggs and toast.
hmm
But I didn't put one on this morning. I wonder why.
oh, just forgot.
I guess so.
See, I have to weigh mine because I'm have to be really particular
Yeah.
with my
Yeah.
probiotics. So it kind of reminds me, it's the first thing I do when I start to get dinner together is to get the little scales out and weigh 25 grams of sauerkraut out.
Yeah.
So I
That is a good
rarely forget it
reminder.
mm,
Yeah.
because of that. Whereas I just plonk it on Rob's plate because he eats
Mm.
just, whatever, a spoonful, two spoonfuls, whatever's around. So,
Quarter cup.
we are having a very interesting episode for me today. And before we get
Yeah.
into it, we've got a couple of wonderful reviews from listeners to read. Um, I will go ahead with the first one, which is from Susan27, who
Mhm.
gave us 5 stars. And she titled her review, Encouraging. Never do these ladies make you feel like you are less than or behind in your health journey. Just honest discussion and great tips and tricks and years of experience. I look forward to every episode. Also, their cookbook is lovely and full of inspiration. That's from Justine. She signed it at the bottom. Thank you, Justine. That's a
Oh,
wonderful, wonderful review.
that
Have
is
you got one
that
there,
is great.
Andrea, as well?
Yeah,
Got one
I
there
have
as well.
one
Yeah,
from
read us your one.
Bring the 90s Back. I'm down with that. Gary was
Down
just
with that. You're up with that.
telling his mom the other day, I want to go back to the 80s, like all the jackets were better.
I don't know if I want to bring the 90s back. There
Well,
was
the
a lot of
90s were hard
turmoil in
for
my
you because you did fat
yeah.
free. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly. There was a
not
lot
so
of
fun.
turmoil in my life in the 90s. Not that there's not now, but you know what I mean. Looking
Well,
back.
this is another 5-star review. So thank you.
Mm.
And the title is Life Affirming. I live by myself in the woods in California. It's beautiful, but can get lonely. So I lean on podcasts. Had to break myself of my true crime podcast habit, and I stumbled upon Ancestral Kitchen. These women are so lovely and feel like good friends. Instead of filling my head with ugly crime stories, I am cooking up soaked oats, tending my sourdough starter, making bone broths, and cleaning my dishes while listening to their wise and comforting words. I wish they were 2 hours long. Ha. Thank you, Andrea and Allison.
Oh, that's lovely.
That is,
Sometimes they're in danger of being 2 hours long, these episodes, I tell you.
we've gotten pretty close. I like that. Um, I don't know if this is a he or she, but I like that they said they were listening to it to break their habit of true crime podcast because that's
Mm.
like a really big trend right now, listening to true crime. And I sometimes wonder, like, is that safe to be listening to that scary stuff all
I
the time?
can't
I
do
don't
it.
know.
Oh, I can't. I
Yeah.
don't understand how it's so popular.
I
My
don't like hearing
psyche
those things.
can't deal
Yeah.
with that. Just when Rob and I started going out, we used to watch a program called Dexter together, which
Hmm.
was about a serial killer who was like a
Oh my
good guy.
gosh.
He was a good
He's a
guy.
good guy.
He used to
Oh my.
like kill all the people that the police couldn't actually convict.
Oh my God.
And about 6 months into our relationship, we were just like, we can't watch this anymore. It's just
Mm-mm.
it's pulling at us on purpose. You could feel how it was
Yeah.
sort of toying with you, and it felt
Yeah.
wrong to us. And then since then, I haven't listened to anything like that
I'd be
at all.
curious if bring the 90s back, if you hear this, if you like email us and tell us what inspired you to break the habit.
Yeah,
I just think that would be
I'm
interesting to
glad you
hear about.
did,
Yeah,
because we got
I
a
am
lovely
too.
review, and we
Yeah.
got loads of things going in her kitchen.
So I also wanted to say, Allison,
Mm.
that I've been fielding a lot of feedback on your spelt cookbook. So when this episode comes out, I think your book's been out for 2 months or so.
Yeah.
And I am getting messages from people who bought the book who are saying that they made the bread, they love the bread, or they love the book. Maybe they haven't made it yet, but they bought it and they're
Yeah.
reading it. Because it's only been out as we're recording this for a couple of days, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But um, yeah, so good job on that spelt book, Allison.
Thank
You put a
you.
lot into it. You put a lot
Thank you.
into it. It's
Thank you.
beautiful.
And on the beautiful new website, which is ancestralkitchenpodcast.com,
Yay.
you can find the book. And yeah, I saw this morning on our Discord Patreon channel that Emily had made the pizza. And it looked
Ooh.
so good.
Ooh.
Really good. She posted a picture. So
Well done, Emily.
yeah,
Good.
nice. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about today's topic, which
Let's do it.
is essential oils. And I'm deferring to you because you are the font of knowledge on this. And I'm just going, well, really? Whenever you
What?
talk to me. So we've got lots of really interesting information on oils and their history and how you can use them, particularly how you can use them in the kitchen. And we don't really mean to clean, we mean in your food, which is basically a new thing on me. I was like, what? You use them in food? So we will get to that as we progress through. Do you want to start, Andrea, by sharing a little bit of the history? Because
Mhm.
I didn't realise until I just had a glance at your notes for this, the amazing history of essential oils.
Yeah. Yeah, they go way back. So they're as ancestral as bread and beer. So I'll tell you first what they are in case anybody's listening and doesn't know. Because when
Yeah,
I
please
first
do.
heard the term essential oils, I was like picturing canola oil, basically.
Ah, okay.
I really didn't know what they were. So they are essentially the blood of a plant. So they provide the plant's defense mechanisms against bacteria, viruses, fungi. They come to the point of plant wounds to repair the plant or to
Gosh.
create like a scar to seal off the plant's exposed flesh. And they also move nutrition throughout the plant. So from they can take nutrients that, like in the spruce trees up in Canada, for instance, in the very deepest part of winter, those trees store their most powerful nutrients and defense mechanisms deep down in their roots. And then when
Mm.
it hits the very coldest part of winter, sub zeros, then the plants or the trees pull that potent oil from their roots all the way up through the tree. And as far as tree harvesting goes, that's actually when Young Living, who is the company that I purchased from, that's
Mm.
actually when they harvest the trees because that's when they are the most powerful. And it is
I
also the
see.
worst time in the world to harvest trees. They do it with horses because you can't take trucks in there and with all the snow. And then they have to cut the tree and immediately without stopping, chip it, load it on the truck, drive it, and start the distillation without any delay, or it would just freeze into a giant brick of chips.
Gosh.
Um, but it gets you a really, really strong um oil, just like at different times in your life your blood might be more powerful. you know if you've ever had blood drawn and they'll tell you, oh, your hematocrits are this, your white blood cells are this, your blood can be more or less beneficial to you. Obviously it's always beneficial, but it can be more beneficial,
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
are in peak health. So when you told me right before we started recording that Gabriel had come in the house with a branch of rosemary,
Mm.
and that what you smelled was the fragrant volatile, they're called volatile oils. It always makes me think of David Copperfield. I think it's so fun. But, they're volatile essential oils, um, that they're called volatile because they immediately leap into the air. That's why when you peel an orange, that
Yeah,
burst of
yeah,
citrus, you can smell it
yeah.
throughout the whole house. But the plant was rushing to send healing
Oh, I see.
nutrients to the wound point,
So
where he broke the
When Gable
branch.
breaks off his
Mhm.
rosemary, which he does, literally every day when he comes in,
Yeah,
he's always
that's good.
got a bit of rosemary. And so he's breaking it off,
Yep.
and those oils are coming to mend the wound, basically like a sap on a tree.
Yeah. And actually, there's different points in time when a broken plant reaches its peak benefits too. So, for instance, you can measure that with something called a Brix scale. So, that kind of measures the sugars in the plant. So, an example is when we harvest lavender, and by
Mm.
we, I'm referring to Young Living. I've gone to some of these events. When you harvest lavender and we don't immediately dump it into the distiller, it actually gets spread out on a concrete covered pad
Mm.
because as the plant has been broken, it begins the healing process. Then it reaches a peak point where it has its
I
maximum
see.
healing potential for repairing itself. And then after that, it starts to decline in potency. But what um, the staff at Young Living does is they're testing it continuously with just a little bricks tester you can hold in your hand.
Mm.
And when it reaches its peak, then they put it in the
Ah,
distiller. So then
wow.
you who purchase the oil get your maximum possible benefits out of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
Clever.
interesting learning about
Yeah.
how plants work. And this was when I started studying the chemistry of plants, this was the thing that intrigued me about oils because, as we'll get into a little bit farther down, sometimes, pretty much in the US, people are very skeptical that something that doesn't come out of an orange bottle with a white childproof lid can do anything for you
Yeah.
beneficially. And they say, oh, maybe it's a placebo effect or something.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is that if it was placebo, plants would have died a long time ago. They wouldn't have made it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think
Completely.
plants and certainly animals are known to not be subject to placebo effect. And oils work on every organism,
Yeah.
animals, the same as they do on humans.
If you've been around ancestral food for 10 minutes, you know liver is a superfood. You're looking at a food packed with vitamins A, K, a broad spectrum of B vitamins, CoQ10, bioavailable iron, plus many essential minerals and more. Liver is your first stop when seeking to gain energy and restore your health. Not only is it a delicacy and staple of traditional diets, it's the first thing most animal predators go for when hunting. Are you looking for a good way to work liver into your daily life, but getting it on the table just isn't happening yet or as much as you'd like? This is where liver capsules come in. Allison and I are both supplementing our ancestral diets with liver capsules from One Earth Health. We get all the incredible benefits of liver, even when we're on the road or preparing non-liver meals for our family, and the sourcing and preparation has all been handled for us. One Earth Health produces nutritious organ capsules from 100% grass-fed New Zealand-raised cattle. Support the pod by purchasing through our link, and you'll also get 5% off and free shipping as a bonus. Go to oneearthhealth.com/ancestralkitchen or check the show notes.
So
So,
you can.
talk to us a bit about the kind of the
Hmm,
ancestral, because, that's where
okay.
we're coming from, both of us.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the long, long ancestry of using oils.
Mhm. It goes
So,
way back.
yeah, tell us about that. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, as you and I know, Mesopotamia is where like
Mm.
everything comes from.
Yeah.
um, although there could be more from China earlier as well, but it's hard
Yeah.
at a certain
There's not
point to
enough
know what you're.
records.
Mhm. But the
Yeah.
first known distillation apparatus was developed in Mesopotamia in about 3500 BC. So that
Oh,
is, if you are a frequent listener of the podcast and you heard the beer episode, then you know that that's about when beer was being developed in
yeah.
Mesopotamia as
Yeah.
well. So they were really figuring out a
They were
couple
on it, those
clever
Mesopotamians.
things. I know they were. And you still find a lot of oil and resin use there as well
Hmm.
to this day.
Hmm.
In China in 3000 BC, there was a book published with information on over 300 botanicals and their uses. So, they were using them,
Yeah.
if they were publishing at that point.
Yeah.
Um, 1470 BC, Queen Hatshepsut famously took that big expedition um, to bring back riches and treasures, including, because she's
Mm.
billionaire, a grove of myrrh trees. And anybody who's spent much time reading in antiquity, which I always, I love the old ancient histories and the Bible and things like that are go way back. They all refer constantly to using oils. Anybody who's read the Song of Solomon knows that every second
Yeah.
verse says something about my fingers are dripping with cassia and cinnamon or
Yeah, I'm
something, and
remembering now.
it's just all over. I think there's over 1,100 references to using oils and plants um, in the Bible.
Mm.
Then King Tut was buried in 1330 BC with alabaster jars. They're gorgeous. I've actually seen them, designed to hold precious essential oils.
Where did you see them?
There was a tour
Hmm.
of King Tut's, some of his effects, not him
Okay.
himself, but and it came to Seattle, and
Ah, okay.
I wish I could have gone 14 times. I absolutely loved it, and the Dead Sea Scrolls came once too,
Okay.
and I
Wow.
couldn't I could barely get myself to leave that display. I wanted to stay there all day, but everybody else was like, "Okay, are you just gonna stand there for 45 minutes looking at one little
Thing.
papyrus?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. Do you have a problem with that?"
That's like me in the Uffizi in Florence. The first time I went in
Yeah.
there and I saw
Oh
Botticelli's
my
paintings,
god.
I was like, I'm going to stay here all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a seat
Yeah.
here.
That's why they have benches in front of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt that way in the Tate and in the British Museum, and
Mm.
yeah, some of these Egyptian statues that I spent my childhood drawing were in
Yeah.
um, they were in the British Museum,
British
as well
Museum.
as
Yeah.
some of my favorite mummies were there as well, and I never wanted to leave.
Now we want to do an episode on museums.
King of ancestors. Okay, so Alexander the Great, he burned incense in Macedonia,
Hmm.
um, and then in Israel, crossing over into modern era.
Hmm.
Um, if anybody's heard "We Three Kings of Orient are,"
Yeah, of course.
then you know the wise men brought precious gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh,
Mm.
which have tons of symbolism in the ancient world. And frankincense was more valuable pound for pound than gold. And
Wow.
frankincense and myrrh combined actually triple each other's beneficial effects. So they are often used
Wow.
together.
See, I've got
Um,
frankincense. I've never had myrrh. I put
excuse
myrrh
me.
in a bitters once from the herbalist. I
Ooh,
made a homemade
sounds
bitter
pretty
and I
good.
put myrrh in it. But I love frankincense so much. It's an
I know.
incredible fragrance.
Well, I'll be honest, when I opened my first box of essential oils that I bought and there's a bottle of frankincense in there, I was shocked. Like, I just thought, "Oh, they still make frankincense?" I don't know what I thought particularly, but I had only ever heard of it in the context of,
Yeah,
baby
okay.
Jesus and
Yeah.
the first baby shower and things like that. So I really didn't know it was still in use. All right. So then in Italy, where you are, Pliny
Hmm.
wrote a natural history describing the use
Mm.
of herbs and essential oils. That was about 100 AD. And then in Persia, we saw a physician distilling floral essential oils about 1,000 years after Christ was born. And then into the modern sort of scientific era in the 1930s, Dr. Rene Maurice began actually studying the therapeutic properties of essential oils. So this the 1900s is where you see a lot of things go from, and this would qualify with Weston A. Price as well. A lot of things go from just sort of general ancestral knowledge,
Yeah.
tribal knowledge, or wives' tales into being studied. You know, why do they eat this food before they want to get pregnant? Does it actually affect fertility? Things like that. So then oils were looked at in the same way. And then in the 80s, Dr. Jean Claude, can't pronounce any of these French last names, so I'm not even trying. He did more in depth research on beneficial properties of essential oils. And then,
Hmm.
as far as Young Living goes, in
Mm.
1985, Gary Young experienced the benefits of oils and he traveled to France to meet with some of the old kind of like the dying out sort of old
Yeah.
guys who were studying
Yeah.
oils and using them. And then he um, became so convinced of their ancestral use. And he was also reading the Bible and saw that they were all over there and thought, well, if they had to use them back then, why don't we use them now? So he
Mm.
nobody really had them in the US at this time. So he brought
Okay.
the concept and tried to popularize it with his company, Young Living Essential Oils, which is still now to this day the world leader in essential oils.
Okay.
And it's nice. It's an
You. T-
amazing history because it just goes so far
oh,
back.
it's amazing.
I
It's
know.
amazing. I mean, I had no idea that it went back. I think I've been aware of things like I've read parts of the Bible and now I'm remembering the references to oils,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah,
didn't because I wasn't clocked into it back then. I didn't
I know.
think, oh yeah, of course
They
that's the
do
same
things that
oils.
seem odd, or I always just thought of them as this isn't the right word to use, but I'll use the word magical. So hope hope nobody just turned off the podcast player. But um in Exodus, for instance, which Genesis and Exodus are my two favorite books in the Bible, and they're the most ancestral, I guess. But
Mm.
um the Lord would tell Moses and Aaron after you inspect all these diseased lepers, or after you butcher a
Mm.
thousand whatevers, for sacrifice, then wash all your tools with this blend of oils and then also pour it over yourself.
Okay.
And I always just thought, oh yeah, magical powers. And now I'm like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
they're antiviral and
Yeah.
antibacterial, and I suppose God wasn't gonna describe in stone tablets what, you know,
Look at the
bacteria was.
science. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It just basically said, trust me and don't die.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, the Israelites were there's like 2 million people camping, basically, and they would get these plagues, and
Mm.
God would tell the priests, fill your censers with incense and then go take it into every single
Okay.
tent.
Yeah.
And what we do around here when something crops up is we turn on a resin burner with frankincense, or we turn on a diffuser to cleanse the air. And then you're like, oh, they were doing that in tents in the desert like thousands of years ago.
So I've already got a question. What's the difference between a resin and a diffuser? But I think we're just going to have to do another
Mhm.
episode after we
Yeah, we
finish
can do
this
another one.
one later
Yeah.
in the year on, because we're supposed to be focusing on the kitchen, and I know I'm going to
No,
go off on one and talk about something
we gotta
else.
get to the food.
Yeah.
So we'll
Okay. So
pin that for a future
yeah, I'm pinning it.
question.
What I wanted to ask you was, you talked about how that kind of transition around like 1900, the same as what happened with Western Price, it went from ancestral knowledge
Mhm.
slowly getting lost, and then someone came along and said, hang on, there's like something here, and they started investigating it scientifically. So,
Right.
do we still use oils in the way that our ancestors did in medicine or in food in our world that we live in now, or has that kind of completely stopped and we're just using it for, well, what certainly people in England most associate them with, which is an oil massage.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
No,
Well,
no, please, someone come and give
yes.
me one.
We're just gonna test it for science.
Yeah.
Yes and no. We do still use oils medically. We don't use them in as much as we used to, and I'll explain why.
Yeah.
So they're still used and prescribed in many countries, notably in Europe. Of course, they're used all over the Middle East. And then in Canada as well, they're part of the national health system. They're recognized there. At least that's what I've been told by Canadians.
Okay.
And even in the US, it is still used sometimes. So maybe you've heard of having a clove injection in your tooth. Maybe you're going to get a crown put on in a couple days or something like that. And they'll inject clove in your tooth to keep you numb until then. Oils are also used in the food industry a lot for flavoring foods, um, because they are really awesome for flavoring foods. However, this is where you get into the conflict of money
Mm.
and the largest industry in the world, the multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical world. So, what they do in the pharmaceutical world is they study essential oils, and they look for, I don't know if you've ever seen like a spectrometry graph or whatever they're called, but you can look at oils and you see kind of these spikes. It looks like a heart rate sort of thing that
Okay.
shows different components that are greater or lesser. And then pharmaceutical companies will figure out, okay, this component is really good for this. And then how can we manufacture it synthetically so we can patent it and then make it into a really strong
I
version and sell
see.
it in a pill?
Yeah.
Um, Upside of that could be that you could use it for some really intense medications, that can save lives. And downside of that is, just like nutrition in food, often the components in oils work synergistically.
Yeah.
And so you're typically meant to take it um, as it is so that you can enjoy all
Yeah.
those side benefits.
And that's another thing that reminds me of beer immediately, that
Oh,
if you
yeah.
take a
Yeah.
yeast
Great
out
point.
of a culture and put it in a lab and just generate it and then sell people
Right.
packets of yeast from a lab, you're not
Mhm.
getting all of the spectrum of yeast and bacteria that would have been in a home culture. And, when Rob and I taste the beer that I make here with that, we don't get hangovers. We just don't.
I
And
know.
and
Right.
it's something we think to do with that synergy. between all the
Yeah.
different aspects. And that, like you said, applies to food and
Hmm.
here to oils as well.
Yeah. There's a sort of peculiar, I'm going to use a strong word, but I've observed it so many times that I haven't been able to find another way to explain it. But there's a sort of peculiar ethnocentrism in the US in
Mm,
regards to science, medicine, and food. And that is that something could be considered toxic and banned in every other country in the world. And some many things are literally in
mm,
every other country banned, but they're still used in the US. And then people in the US will say, well, it's fine then. And I'm like, you can't say
mm,
every other scientist is an idiot. Like, you just can't say that.
mm.
Um, or in like food, when we talk about using raw milk in the US, we literally have to start with educating people on the fact that they can eat it or drink
Yeah.
it, that it's safe. And that is thanks to our impressive media. Sally just sent out a letter to all the Weston A Price members. So I'm sure tons of you listening saw this letter where she said that another state legalized raw milk. Yay. And she said, predictably, the media immediately began a campaign telling everybody how dangerous
Yeah.
it is and not to use it.
Don't use it.
And we're so influenced by media and lobby money in the US that it's crazy. But I will say, not our listeners. They're doing the weird
Yay.
ancestral things because they're based and amazing. So we have a good crowd listening to this. So I know I'm
Indeed.
preaching
We
to the
do.
choir.
I want to
Um,
ask about the safety
yeah,
because
it is a good one.
I I mean, I've historically used oils to
Mhm.
diffuse around the house and to put with a carrier oil for massage. And when you started talking to me about using them in food, I kind of looked at the bottles and I thought, can I use this in my food? Is it edible? And
Yeah.
I don't know, are all oils edible that people could go out, listeners could go out and buy, or do they need to look for special ones?
Well, yeah, that's a tricky one because I would say largely no. For
Okay.
instance, some 40%, I want to say 40%, I could be wrong on this number, but 40% more lavender is sold globally than is grown globally. So unless we're growing it on the moon
Mm.
somewhere, somebody's faking lavender. And
So what? So you mean someone's making it in a laboratory? Yeah,
yes,
laboratory.
yes.
Get the word out.
Um, Jasmine, for instance, is one of the most popular aromatics for perfume,
Mm.
and virtually all jasmine in the world is fake,
Gosh.
which is why it smells horrible. And then when you smell real jasmine,
Yeah, it
you
smells
almost get
amazing.
drunk. You're like, I can't even walk away from this. What
Right.
is this? And it's, oh no, it's
Yeah.
these beautiful tiny white flowers that can only be
Mm.
harvested at dawn before the dew melts off of them by hand on giant flat trays
Yeah.
and historically by females only. And so, yeah, it's really freaking expensive.
No
So,
wonder.
yeah, it's very sacred, a lot of these
Mm.
things. And we do the same thing with food where we just want a lot of it. We want the cheap chicken. We want it coming out of a factory so we can get it for 99 cents a pound. And we don't care how nutritious it is or not. Of course, listeners don't think that way, but generally speaking, that's like a modern attitude. Oils are also, um, when you distill a plant, you can distill it with just pure, clean, unchlorinated water.
Hmm.
Or you can get a lot more out of that plant if you add chemicals that are extractives. And the
I
most
see.
popular one is hexane. And yes, this will turn up in the finished product. And yes, hexane does cause cancer. So that doesn't have to go on a label. They don't tell you how they
Right.
distilled the plant. And a lot of plants are sold through brokers, and then a lot of oil is distilled and sold through brokers. So by the time a labeling
Yeah.
company purchases the oil,
There's
they
no
couldn't tell
traceability.
you
Mm.
where it grew, how it grew, what conditions it grew under, if the seed was GMO, if there was Roundup used around the plants. They couldn't tell you if the water that watered the plants was chlorinated because that will affect the plant. And they
Mm.
certainly couldn't tell you if there was any distillation agents used in the process. And then to compound that in the US, and I don't know how it is outside of the US, but in the US, we have this label law that says so when you distill, have you ever seen someone distilling oils, Allison?
No, no, I haven't.
I'll send you some pictures that I took last
Okay.
time I was at the distillation plant. But if you watch somebody distill, just picture a giant vat that's typically underground just because it's huge and it's easier to throw the plant material in from ground level. So a
Mhm.
giant vat underground, and then the plants go in there, and then it's steamed, and then all the vapor rises up to the top and goes out through a tube,
Mhm.
and then goes down into giant, well, should be glass, um, kind of giant beakers. And then you can watch it dripping in, and then in those giant beakers, it will begin to separate. So the bottom will be basically the water. So hydrosol is what it's called, floral water.
Mhm.
And this has tons of benefits and is really good for you, but it is not as potent as what floats on top of the hydrosol, which is the more viscous oil. And that oil is a smaller percentage. If you've ever watched it, then the hydrosol is typically way more.
Okay.
But the oil is a smaller percentage. Now, when you're bottling oil in the US legally, if at least 3%, only 3% of your bottle is that oil, the rest could be hydrosol or coconut oil or honestly anything you want. You can label it as 100% pure therapeutic grade essential oil if at least 3% of that
Huh?
qualifies. It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's not an essential oil. That's 3% essential oil.
Yeah, and it could still be a great product if you had some pure hydrosol. I've used hydrosol before. Hydrosol has great benefits. You can use different hydrosols from different plants for different things. You can spray it on your skin, put it in your hair, spray it on your baby's feet. There's different things you can do with it, but it's not oil, and it's certainly not as valuable, aka as expensive or precious as the oil is. And if you're going for a really potent effect, then you want the total oil. You won't need very much of it, but you do want the total oil. So all that to say, no, not all oils are edible. And as far as plants go, I suppose you could distill a poisonous plant, but I don't know that anybody's really doing that.
Mm.
Um, as far as which plants are edible. Young Living
Yeah.
is it's the one I'm the most familiar with because when I was first introduced to the concept of oils, I very quickly ran through a bunch of different brands that I discounted immediately for various reasons. For
Mhm.
instance, if you call them and ask, "Where do you grow your lavender?" and they're like, "I don't know," then that's don't buy.
Mhm.
That's the end of that. Excuse me. But I chose to investigate Young Living more deeply, and then I met with Gary Young, and he's since passed away. And I met with his wife, and I met with the president of their company. And then over time, I met with a bunch more different executives and people that worked within the company, went to their bottling facility, visited a number of their farms to watch them distilling, um, watched their growing process, planting process, talked to the farmers that worked on the farms. Like I really went kind of overboard
Deep.
because the more I read about the chemistry of oils, the more I was like, oh my goodness, this is really potent. And when you can combine an oil um, with something and put it on your body, and it will carry that nutrition into every cell of your body. And so if you're distilling it with hexane,
Yeah.
then immediately we have a problem because
Yeah.
oils are so small that they can travel through your cell wall. And that's an enormous benefit when that's what you're going for and you know what you have in your bottle. But that's very dangerous if you don't know what's in your bottle. And I will say that I had a ton of oils in my house at that time and I threw them all away, even though it felt wasteful. But on the flip side, chemotherapy sounded really expensive. So I
I
threw them
think
away.
that there's a parallels with food here that you had to
100%.
do that research in order to find a supply that you were happy with.
Yeah,
And
it
just
is the
like,
same.
we do with our farmers and listeners do with their meat and the dairy and their eggs to
Yeah,
get a supply that they're happy with. Um,
absolutely. Like,
and
what are they feeding? What are they feeding the cow?
yeah,
What are they feeding their chickens? These is the water chlorinated? These things matter.
yeah, yeah. So,
Um,
let's
well,
talk about the kitchen. Oh, go on. Do
I
you
was
want to say
gonna add
something?
one more weird thing that's US specific. So I don't know if this applies outside the
Okay.
US, but US specific, we have the FDA. And the FDA has three paradigms for labeling. One is topical use, one is internal use,
Yeah.
and one is, I want to say maybe it's just aromatic. You can't
Okay.
apply more than two to a label. So
Right.
they required Young Living to generate special labels for their oils. So, for instance, we have lemon oil and we have edible lemon oil
I
because you
see.
needed a different label. They are distilled and grown the exact same way. They just have a different label because that's the law out here. So,
Okay.
if somebody has a question, is an oil edible? You really, really want to be sure. You could just look and see, does Young Living have the
I see.
ingestible label? And then I would caution you against using something from most stores because those bottles will also say on the back. And I've looked at these bottles and I'm like, I don't see what the point of this is, but they say, do not get it on your skin, do not ingest it, do not inhale. And I'm like, what are you supposed to do
What
with
am I going to
this?
do with it then? Just put it on the
Look at the
shelf and
bottle.
look at it.
I don't
Yeah.
get it. Yeah. So just know it's just like the food. They're not all created equal. And
It's like I remember when I was looking at the packaging for paints
oh
before I
no.
switched to completely, making my own paint,
Mhm.
that they had like don't flush this down the sink because fish die. Just like, well, what is an artist going to do with it? When they
Yeah,
try and
what
clean
do
their
you
brushes, it's
do?
going to go down the sink, isn't it?
That's the company
Just
protecting themselves, right? Because they
yeah,
know you're going to do that
yeah,
anyways. But then if you
yeah,
do it and the fish die, they're like, "We told you not to do it."
yeah. Excellent.
They just pass the burden on
Exactly.
to you.
How do you feel about our food world? Do you want to see change like we do? If so, head over to patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast and help support us to get this work out as far and wide as we can. To say thank you, we've got a host of extra ancestral food material to share with you. You can connect with us more deeply via our Patreon exclusive podcasts, our after show chats, our dedicated forum, and our ancestral food get togethers. And there's a library of downloads that will support you in your own kitchen. By joining, you'll be really helping us to continue making this podcast and to focus on having a bigger impact, reaching more people, making a greater difference. So we can move together towards the future food world we all want to see. We've got 4 levels of support to suit different pockets. Check out www.patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast for all the details. Let's talk about the kitchen because I
'Cause
want
we
to
love the
know
kitchen.
why I should use oils in my kitchen. Why should I be using an oil rather than
Yeah.
just a sprig of herb? Some rosemary
Mhm.
or some dried rosemary even. Why should I be
Yeah.
using? Tell us what the health benefits are, or are you doing it for the flavour, or why are you doing it?
Sure. Sometimes you do want to use a sprig of herbs.
Mm.
Putting a drop of mint on top of your whipped raspberry panna cotta does not have the same ring as putting a sprig of mint on top. Um, so sometimes you do need those herbs, but there's lots of benefits. And this is where I'm going to be very careful with what I say. And this again comes back to the pharmaceutical industry because once the pharmaceutical industry invents a synthetic copy of something and then patents it for a specific usage that has a specific symptom description, for instance, um, we'll say anxiety. They
Mm.
once they have a drug for something that works for anxiety, you're no longer allowed to use that word in conversation with non-pharmaceutical things that you may or may not sell. Um, so whether it's been used for thousands of years for that purpose and every other country in the world enjoys the benefits of it, if we sell in the US a pill that does the same thing, we can't say it.
Hmm.
And believe me, they have pills for everything.
Yeah.
So it really kind of neuters the language in a way of what we can say. So I'm going to speak circumspectly about benefits and I'm going to be cautious about what I say.
Hmm.
Um, and then we always have to say things like, go do your own research.
Yeah, I have to say, I trust you.
Yeah, believe me, I've read thousands of pages,
Mm.
PubMed, research studies. Um, and the more I read, the more I'm like, I can't believe that in the last 50 years we tried to discard this ancestral method of care that has been around for thousands of years now that we can even study the benefits. But
Mm.
why you would use them in your kitchen? Yes, there are health benefits that you can get. And sometimes, like you and I were talking the other day about you were ordering some herbs.
Mm.
Um, you weren't ordering them for the smell, you were ordering them for the benefits that they would give you.
Mm.
And oils can be the same way. Oftentimes, like you and I said in the beginning, the delicious massage, you might want them to pick something that smells really nice, right?
Mm.
But oftentimes with oils, you actually want the thing that gives you the most benefit. Maybe not so much for the smell. The smell might just be the side
Mm.
benefit. Um, and like some of the best oils to use in massage are actually oregano and thyme and um, peppermint, and not always ones that you would think of for
Mm.
fragrance. You end up smelling a little bit like spaghetti sauce at the end, but it's some really great benefits. You can get benefits from using oils that you don't get from dried herbs,
Okay.
especially particularly commercial dried herbs. There's a 6-month rule on dried herbs. You want to use them within 6 months. And if you're like me, every single one of us is thinking, I have dried herbs that are way older than six
Yeah.
months. And when you buy them commercially, they could be years old. We often have no idea how
Yeah,
old they
how
are by
long
the
they've
time
been
we
on the
get them.
shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, and the use by date can be pretty far out there,
Mm-mm.
which they're not going to go bad. They're not going to harm you, but you won't necessarily get benefits from them. And I remember
Mm.
the first time I used fresh parsley after using dried parsley my whole life, I was like, oh my gosh, parsley has
I
flavor.
know.
I just thought it was there for like green sparkles on top of
I think that
something.
dried parsley isn't like a herb. I don't know. I've never been
I
able
think
to
it's a
find a
sin.
dried parsley that tastes of anything. And I only
Dried
ever
parsley is
use
pointless.
fresh parsley now. I don't
Yeah.
have a dried parsley in my kitchen.
I don't have it either. There's no point.
Mm.
Um, I could shave up any grass out of the yard.
Yeah.
Um, but oils evaporate very quickly. Well, if you remember Gabriel bringing in the rosemary, the oils were
Yeah.
immediately beginning to evaporate from the plant, leaving the plant. And of course, you can often smell the fragrance years later, so they may not all be gone, but
Yeah.
much of the oil will evaporate from ground and dried herbs. And the same goes for your teas. Um, and so if you, for instance, were saying, oh, I want to increase peppermint in my diet for such and so benefits, and you turned to dried peppermint, you might need to go through baskets and baskets of dried peppermint to try and achieve that goal you had in mind,
Mm.
maybe drying your mucous membranes up or something, because so much of the potency would be lost. So
Mm.
often, when you use oils in the kitchen, it is actually because you're trying to derive some health benefits. And sometimes we even put them directly into capsules. You can buy empty capsules. Or if
Mhm.
you're buying something like liver capsule and mixing it into, say, a smoothie, then you can save that empty capsule and refill it maybe
Mhm.
with oils. Um, so Gary takes frankincense and Idaho blue spruce um, daily in a capsule.
Okay.
um, some of the health benefits that you can get from your oils include you can sort of design ways to positively affect your hormones, your endocrine system generally,
Mhm.
or maybe you're trying to tackle a specific problem. And so you could look up oils that pertained to that issue and choose those and maybe keep them in your kitchen for a while and use them periodically. You can also make a tea out of it by just putting a drop into your cup. Um, or I often make like a broth tea.
Hmm.
So I'll put broth on the stove and heat it. And then because I don't like to boil my oils, it's not necessarily good for them. Just like with foods, you can lose some benefits by doing
Yeah.
that. Um, I like to heat my broth, take it off the stove, and then add a drop of sometimes dill,
Hmm.
which is considered very beneficial for your blood sugar, your endocrine system generally, or oregano, which is
Hmm.
great to take in the winter, um, and also tastes delicious in broth.
Mm.
So there's kind of multiple benefits. And when you were talking about salmon earlier, I remembered my
Ah,
friend
yeah.
Claudia, she always puts lemon oil on her salmon when she bakes it.
Oh,
And that's because she likes the lemon flavor.
yeah.
Well, I thought, well, that's interesting. I've never tried that. But I love salmon and I don't have it very often either for the same reasons as you do.
Mm.
So I haven't tried that yet. When I first heard Allison talking about boza, the fermented drink made of millet that's a household name in Turkey, I felt as if I was being transported back to a bazaar in the Ottoman Empire or traveling the Silk Road on the back of a camel, and I knew I wanted to taste it. Boza is fizzy, sweet, tart, and it's full of probiotics. You can drop it into your smoothies, spoon it on top of your breakfast, or drink it in the traditional way they still do in Istanbul, topped with cinnamon and toasted chickpeas. Fermented millet drinks were first made in that region of Europe in the 8th century BC, and as with all of Allison's courses, she's gone above and beyond in research and experimentation and testing on Rob and Gabe and given us an easy way to recreate the goodness in our own homes. If you'd like a fun and tasty way to get more probiotics into your life, bring her into your kitchen and have her walk you through how to bring this ancestral dairy-free, gluten-free fermentation recipe with her amazing Boza video course. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/boza, BOZA, to check out the video course. And happy fermentation!
What other ways? Tell us some other ways that you use oils in the kitchen, because I like the oil in the broth
Mm,
idea. And
yeah.
now I'm kind of thinking, oh, I could use like a drop of oil when, for example, when I make the cast iron ground meat recipe, which is in the
Yeah.
cookbook.
Yeah.
I usually either I go kind of oregano or rosemary kind of way, or I go
Uh-huh.
spicy way and put
Mm,
coriander and that kind of thing in it. And I'm thinking that would benefit from a drop or
yeah.
two maybe of those oils in it, rather than using the actual dried herbs. I could just stir them in when I take it off the heat at the end.
Yeah.
Give us some other ideas.
Yes. That is something we do a lot.
Mm.
And my mom, like with many things in my life, she's a true master of this. She actually knows all of her favorite, like her favorite beef stew or her favorite pea soup. She has these really recipes that she makes all the time that are her favorites. And then she knows which oils she uses in them. So she actually takes an empty bottle and she'll mix the ratio
I
of
see.
oils that she likes. So she'll put maybe sometimes 10 different oils in there and she basically labels it beef stew.
I
And
see.
then when she makes her beef stew, she can put in one drop of that combination and she gets a little bit of the flavor of each, but she's not using 10 drops of
I
oil.
see. Yeah, because
So
that
it's
would be
also,
just too much.
yeah, it would be too much. And it's also economical this way because um, you don't have to use the same quantity and
I want to
it's
know what oil she
delicious.
puts in that stew now. Can you put it in the Discord? Can you ask her and
You know
go into
what? Yes,
Discord and put it
actually,
in
I
there for
think
us?
we made recipe cards of some of her favorite recipes. I could just
Okay.
post those in the
Yeah,
Discord for
that
the
would be
patrons.
fabulous. Yeah.
I can do that. Just because I wanted to print them, and have them in front of me. And she
Mm.
does the same for mulled apple cider.
Hmm.
So um she puts it on the stove and heats it, and then she adds like a drop of her combination of oils. And then when you drink it, it's like got this clove and cinnamon bark and all these different, orange different flavors in it. Um,
Yum.
so yeah, we use it in broth, TB of course. It's a
Mhm.
very quick way to flavor tibikos.
That
Um,
is water kefir.
yep.
What water kefir should be called.
Is this episode coming out before or after
This is
Sanders'
coming out
episode?
after Sandal's episode, directly after
Nice.
Sandal's episode. So go
Nice.
back and listen to. Oh, actually, no, it's the Patreon where he talks about it, isn't it?
Oh, it's the
It's the
patron where he
Patreon
schooled us.
extra where he tells us off for calling water
He
kefir
did.
water kefir.
Yeah. Go listen to the patron extra and you'll hear Sandra Katz tell us off. Um, but some of my favorite Tibikos recipes involve essential oils, like putting in um, chopped pears and a drop of ginger essential oil. That's one of our favorites.
Okay,
And
nice.
the other's different things you can do where you're immediately flavoring something where it might otherwise need to sit. And I've used it, say if I'm going to somebody's house or we have people coming over or something, and I really quickly want to have a flavored drink, then instead of having something sit for a long time and there's nothing wrong with that, you can have your Tibico sit full of herbs for a long time and extract flavor
Mm,
from them. But that does change the fermentation quality a little bit. And I like sometimes just getting that. I make a chai spice combo. Um,
mhm,
so like cardamom and clove and black pepper
mm.
and ginger, different things combined. And I also, while I put that in kombucha, but I also like that in a golden milk or warm,
Yeah,
like turmeric
yeah,
milk.
yeah.
It's good in yogurts, milk
Mhm,
kefir, soups,
mhm,
obviously,
yeah.
sauces, of course, pizza sauce.
Mm,
Um, if you if you like peppermint brownies, which I do, I've made peppermint brownies before.
mhm.
Um, Gosh, we use them all the time in the kitchen, certainly in beverages of all
So
sorts.
give us an example. How do you make the pizza sauce? What do you do to
Yeah,
make
the
that?
pizza sauce, that is one that, here's the other weird thing, Allison, and I feel like I sound weird when I say it, but I sound weird when I say lots of things, so we're all weird here. But, okay, when I use essential oils in a recipe, I serve it, I
Mm,
get so many compliments, and I like, more than normal. And
wow.
I don't know why that is. I've thought about it all the time. Like, I remember even one time when I made a lemon meringue pie and I gave a slice to our elderly neighbor when we lived in Virginia. And
Mm.
she came back across the street and said, "That is the most lemony lemon meringue pie. It was like just right lemony. It wasn't too lemony." And I was like, "What is wrong with it? I just can't even hand out a piece of food with oils in it without somebody going, 'This is bonkers. How good is this?'" But our pizza sauce, which
Mm,
people are always asking me, "How do you make the pizza sauce?" It's just 16 ounces of tomato sauce. And if I have it in a jar, I just open the jar and I dump everything right into the jar, put the lid back on, and then I shake it. And then I
okay.
pour it over I mean, we're talking lazy
That's
here.
easy, easy.
Fish saving. So I put in 16 ounces of tomato sauce and then about a teaspoon of salt.
Mm,
Um, and then I do 1 drop each
mhm.
of oregano, basil, thyme, and black pepper, and sometimes I just go crazy and grab whatever else because I have a rack in the kitchen. I've got parsley on there and, some other herbs, and to just throw them in.
Okay.
And then I kind of prick the pizza dough with a fork, and
Yeah.
then I drizzle a little oil on it, lard usually, and then because I'm not putting lard in the sauce,
Yeah,
and then I
yeah.
pour the sauce. I told you, lazy. I pour the sauce on top of the pizza, and
Mm.
then, we dump on whatever everybody's in the mood for, crack eggs on top or pile meat on, or, do the
So you've got,
cracklings or whatever.
if you were using oregano, basil, thyme, and black pepper, you've got 4
Mm.
drops to 16 ounces of sauce.
Yeah,
It's a good
which
guide.
which I like, and it doesn't have to be that much, if I was as
Mm.
organized as my mom, she would be literally falling over laughing if I said that because she says she's not organized, but she is. Um, she can pull up the folder to show you. But if I was as organized as my mom, then I
Mm.
would pre-mix all of those.
Yeah, and then you
But
just
I
have 1 bottle, which is your pizza
Yep,
sauce.
yep, yeah, just call it pizza sauce.
Yeah, yeah.
And then say, for the kids' reference, I would probably put on the label, 4 drops per pint or something.
Yeah.
But, I'll get there one day. I'll
So I
ascend.
I want to add in here that there is my recipe for the spelt sourdough pizza base in
Yes.
our second cookbook, which Andrea talked about earlier on, spelt
Yep.
sourdough every day. So listeners could make that pizza base, which is
Oh, yeah.
very, very good. And
Very
then
good.
they could put that sauce on the top. Be
Yeah,
wonderful.
combine
And then invite me
me and
for
Allison.
eating.
Maybe if we do I suppose we'll probably come out with second editions of all our books eventually, then we could add the pizza sauce because it literally takes like 2 sentences to write
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah, I could have put that in. Oh, if only I'd
There are
known.
so many things that you can use your oils for in the kitchen, Allison. It's just mind blowing. And once you start, then it's like lard. When people always say to me, "Well, what are you going to use all that lard for?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What does anybody use lard for?" And so then people say, "Well, what do you use oils in the kitchen for?" I'm like, "I don't know. What does anybody use oregano for?"
Yeah. I think, you said you've got that rack in your kitchen. And
Yeah.
then I can imagine if I had that, my hand would just be going to it. I'd be doing something. I'd
Oh,
think,
I
oh, a
know.
drop of that,
I know.
a drop of
You
that,
just go crazy. And
then,
really, if you make those combos, then everything lasts for
yeah.
such a long time. And as we know, because we've found them in King Tut's tomb and
Mm.
residues in thousands-year-old pots, um, oils last basically forever.
And can
The
you get
oils that
oils for everything that I would find on my spice rack or not?
um probably just about. I suppose it
Hmm.
depends on what somebody's been motivated to distill.
Yeah. I'm thinking like,
Gary Young
can you
would.
get turmeric oil?
I
I have
don't
to look that
think
one
I've
up.
seen that. Mm-mm.
I might have to have a turmeric on the side then as
Young
well.
Living has, interestingly enough, they have a supplement for joints. That's what it's
Oh,
advertised for. But you and I know that turmeric has tons of benefits.
yeah,
But it has
yeah.
turmeric in it as well
I
as black
see.
pepper oil. And what's fascinating about that is if you've ever cooked with turmeric, you know the traditional ancestral recipes typically include black pepper.
Yeah, yeah,
Why this is because the curcumin in the black pepper is needed to extract in your body the benefits that we all want turmeric for.
mm,
So our ancestors combined them. So when you see a capsule for turmeric, typically there'll be black pepper in it. But
mm,
what's interesting with the Young Living one is they use the oil because the
yeah,
oil, if you recall, is so small that it can transport the benefits from that capsule into your cells. And they found basically by analyzing the urine of people that, sorry to say that on a kitchen episode, that um, when you combine essential oils with your nutritionals, you absorb pretty much all of it, about 98% of it, into your body within a matter of hours. I think we talked about this before, Allison,
mm.
versus typically if you take a nutritional, you might absorb up to 40% in 24 hours and you'll pee the rest out. So
I
it's
see.
interesting what the reasons why our ancestors would, I mean, people would fight wars to get essential oils. They
Yeah,
would travel, to Macedonia or to Lebanon and these far distant places, Persia. They would send people to bring these oils back, and um, there were spice traders on the Silk Route, and if anybody's heard the word ointment,
yeah,
ointment comes from the word anoint or anointment, which is
yeah, of
which
course.
means myrrh. So myrrh was basically synonymous with the word anoint or ointment because myrrh was combined with everything as sort of a carrier.
Mm,
And
okay.
we know now that it complements and amplifies the benefits of a lot of oils. So our ancestors are
So
really very
clever.
wise.
Yeah,
So wise. And the thing is, they figured this all out like by dying, by
yeah,
either living or
yeah,
dying,
exactly.
And the fact that kings would count their wealth in terms of how much oil they had tells us something about the benefits that the ancients saw in these oils. But,
Mm,
modern day, we are just too smart for these things and we just cast
mm,
it all aside and
of
move on to
course.
synthetics because we know better now. It's just
So,
wild.
before we wrap up, just give us a kind of a peek into what other things outside the kitchen that you use oils for in your household.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a follow-up episode later in
Yeah,
the
oh,
year.
yeah, I think we definitely should do.
Well, certainly during my pregnancies and postpartums and taking care of my children and babies,
Mm.
I leaned heavily on oils as a route to avoid sometimes other modalities that were less preferable to me.
Mm.
Certainly good in bath and foot soaks
Mm.
because you can achieve lots of um, benefits that way. Scalp treatments, I know we've talked about that before.
Mm.
Um, Really good for hair. Cleaning sprays, of course, just like
Yeah.
Moses and Aaron and the Levites and the priests in Exodus, you can use it to clean things. We use it when we're butchering a lot to clean our surfaces
Mm.
continuously and then to treat them at the end where they just sort of sit and air dry. Certainly in laundry and stain removal. Um,
Yeah.
on the farm, we use it to clean the milking machine,
Mm.
for cleaning cow udders and for udder treatments. We had a um, cow with a sore on her udder. And when we
Mm.
got her, she'd had it for like a year and it was being
Oh.
treated with the traditional treatment that everybody uses for cows.
Mm.
Um, and to using, I transitioned to using the animal ointment that Young Living sells,
Mm.
which has oils in it. And it went away like almost
Wow.
immediately. Um, so we also feed it to our chickens in their water, and you can put it in feed as well as a supplement. And we use it on the dogs and the cats. We have a dog that has a persistent hip problem, and Gary will take some oils on his hand and just like do a really deep
Yeah.
massage in her hip. She loves it, and it gives her muscles some relaxation
Relief.
benefits.
Yeah.
She doesn't know
Wonderful.
what he's doing, so
We should
no placebo there.
we should definitely do another episode on this because there's so much information that you have to
Yeah, that'd
share,
be
and
really
I
fun.
know that I'm interested in it, which means that listeners will be interested in it too.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you got some recipes other than that pizza recipe? Are there
yeah.
some recipes that we can give to listeners?
I don't know. Can you top pizza? Oh, wait,
No, no,
you
not
can.
not on the
That was a
sourdough
bad pun.
spelt.
Yeah,
Very funny.
okay.
Very funny.
Yes, I do. Actually, I made a booklet with Sabrina, and
Mm.
I collected recipes from a bunch of people across Young Living, and we were
Okay.
just putting together a booklet for our fall theme, which is pumpkin spice. But,
Okay.
there's recipes in there for things ranging from little desserts to like coffee creamers. Oh my gosh, coffee creamers, such a good place to use your oils.
Mm.
Uh, or tea creamer, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I can post that. Um, where should I put it? Show
On the
notes? Where
new
should the link be?
website. No, we'll put
Oh,
it on the new
perfect.
we'll put it on the new website,
Oh,
and then
so
we'll
much
put
better
a
than show
link
notes.
to it in the show notes. And so um, it'll be really good for listeners now, but also if they do
Yeah,
want to play with pumpkin spice later in the year, they can also dive back into it then
yeah.
and
Well,
get
plus
the
you
goodies
just
from it.
see things in there that you're like, wait a minute, you used those to make a creamer. I think, you
Yeah,
know,
I've got
maybe
an
you
idea.
have, I've got cardamom and cinnamon. I want to try making a creamer
Yeah,
with those.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, just
And
check
if
your,
on that website,
mhm,
ancestralkitchenpodcast.com, the new website,
mhm.
there is also a tab which I think is called resources. And on that page, you will find a list of things that Andrew and I love to use that
Yes.
you can help support the podcast whilst using it along with us in your kitchens. And there is a link there to Andrea's Young Living setup. So if you
Oh
do
yeah.
decide you want to go and
Forgot
get
about
some
that.
oils, then feel free to go there and you'll be helping us continue to do the work
Yeah.
that we're both doing.
Yeah. I'm looking at the website right now. So
Oh, good.
resources is where you've got your courses here,
Yeah.
the grain mill. Yes. We need
Yeah.
to talk more about the grain mill this year,
Oh, I
Allison.
think we
This
will.
needs to be the year of grinding grain. I'm serious. Which means then we need to talk about the bread baker. Oh, Allison, I broke
Mm.
my pizza stone.
Oh, it's time for a new one.
I've had it for 15 years.
Oh gosh, I've done that.
And
I've
it
broken
was,
pizza stone.
I
It's
forgot it was leaning against a cooler, and I moved the cooler and it fell and
oh,
just smashed 3
I,
pieces.
I dropped mine
So
once.
I guess
Yeah.
now I can be a customer of your bakeware. Buy a new pizza
Yes, because the
stone.
pizza stone is on there is in the resources
Yep.
page
And
as well,
then
isn't it?
if
Yeah.
people go to downloads, then we have, ah, man, you guys did such a good job setting this up. Cheers,
Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah.
And your vision, Allison, because you've wanted this from day one.
Mm.
But at the top, it says podcast downloads, and then you've got the podcast downloads that are available to everybody, like the 20 small steps to an ancestral kitchen, and then the patron exclusive downloads. So
Mm-hmm.
our supporters can download their extra benefits there, which are sheesh. Business going down. It's
Getting
a lot.
bigger. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's good.
It's turning into a really nice, beautiful little collection of ancestral wisdom, which is
Mhm.
nice.
Oils are sometimes called, they're like a sort of inadvertent step to an ancestral kitchen, Allison. I've heard a lot of people
Mm.
say it's the gateway, because now that they've kind of been popularized on social media, people hear about them.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I see people go from diffusing peppermint to finding a raw milk supplier to making kefir to sending me pictures of
It's
their
like the
brie in
trigger.
their kitchen, you know? It's like it set something off, and I sometimes wonder, is it just because it opened the portal into the ancestral world, or is it because you had more energy and you felt better now, or is it like, what is it? I don't know what it is,
I'm
but
glad
it's a
it's
gateway.
happening. Yeah, I'm glad it's
Yeah, it's a
happening.
good one.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you want to say before we stop?
We'll save it for the next one.
Yeah, let's save it for the next one, definitely. Thank you
Yeah.
ever so much for sharing everything with us.
Yeah.
It's been
It was fun to
eye-opening
talk
for
about it.
me, and I'm sure for people listening. And
Mm,
yeah, I want to
good.
just like dump off my herb shelf now and replace it with a rack of oils. It would be
No, you
easier
can just
too.
add them. You can just
Yeah,
add
okay,
them.
okay.
Have both.
I'll add them. Okay. All right then. Wonderful. Thanks very much, Andrea. Until
All
next
right. Bye,
time.
Allison.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Allison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.